And we are wrapping up our 5-year celebrations today, and joining me is none other than the legend himself, Brent Cook, editor of Exploration Insights. Brent, thanks for coming on today.
It's a pleasure. It's glad to be here after be the last one on the show.
It's a position many people wanted. So Brent, looking at the mining industry now, I mean, we're looking today and then take a look back 5 years ago. Do you think we're in better shape today than we were those 5 years ago?
We're actually probably in the same shape, just no one knew how bad it was 5 years ago. In reality, it was better back then. At least it certainly felt better back then. Today, reality is hit pretty hard, and it's been tough. It's as ugly as I've seen it.
Yikes. All right, we'll move on to happier times and your first interview with Daniela. That was at New York City. Now, one of your points in the interview was you were mentioning countries that you liked in terms of mining jurisdictions. Now, and you also said that it was tough to, predict what something's going to look like now and 10 years from now. Case in point is you liked Argentina 5 years ago, and of course we all know what happened there.
Well, I think there's certainly a lesson there. At that time, Argentina seemed to be doing quite well. It was an underexplored area. There were discoveries being made, a major discovery, a number of major discoveries were made, but the politics there just, cycled to the bad side. And I think that happens every 10 years in Argentina. I think right now it's probably a better place to be looking than it was a few years ago. But politics are tough. It's tough to forecast what's going to happen in the future, what governments are going to do. So it cycles through, but it's a tough call on, you can say right now, like I think Nicaragua and Burkina Faso are two countries that are really good to develop in. Things could change there, in the next 2 years, and they could go all different. It's tough business.
Now, sticking with that maiden interview with Daniela, you'd also mentioned kind of an inkling towards a fear of lack of discovery. It wasn't full on, but you'd mentioned that this was an issue and it's been compounded in the last 5 years since that interview. So what I'm getting at is we saw Chuck Jeunesse come out a couple months ago stating that he thought peak production was going to be next year. So, do you think we're at peak gold production or maybe near that top?
Well, I think in terms of discoveries, it has certainly come to pass. Discoveries, legitimate economic discoveries, I want to make that real clear, have become less and less. And there's a lot of reasons for that, be it it's getting harder to find things. The world's been scanned in a lot more detail. Everything we do find, not everything, but the most of it is going to be undercover, blind, so much more expensive to find. So even the discovery rate is going down because of that, because there's just not that many economic deposits. And I think that's going to get more serious. And that goes into your question about production. I think we're going to see peak production in gold next year, and then it's going to drop off just because of that. And then even if you're successful, a timeline to develop these things has gone from 10 to 20 years now. And then there's all the political issues we threw in on top of that, and then the environmental and social issues. So we are reaching, I think, peak gold production, and I think we certainly reached peak economic discoveries.
Just to touch on that point about cover, you take a country like Australia, who has 80% of its landmass under cover, that's under real thick, hard rock to get through, and they still put out great amounts of gold, I think second in the world, but still, this is a country that's looking towards mechanization and new technologies to kind of pierce through that rock, spending the least amount of money and wasting the least amount of time just excavating or looking in random areas. So, do you think new technologies are really starting to make their way into the industry right now?
Well, certainly a help. I think new technologies and better mining methods and that sort of thing will help improve the mine costs, if you will. But you're still faced with a much more complicated mining scenario when you're dealing with something underground. I don't see any technological advance that's going to make it much more, make a lot of deposits become economic that are currently not economic.
Hey, Brent, we'll wrap up with earnings season coming up in a couple of weeks. Now, off camera, we were chatting a little bit about cost cutting and how, we've seen the miners shed cost and dollars off the ounces. But we're not really sure if they're doing it the right way, if the money's coming off in the right spots. What do you think?
Well, they're doing the only thing they can do. Your average all-in production costs across the board for most of the major mining companies is higher than the current gold price. So they're cutting, and they're cutting to the bone. Exploration is going. Development projects are being delayed or canceled. And even more importantly, I think that what they really are doing is high grading the deposit, which is basically what they're going into, is that going after the better parts of the deposits. What that does in the long term is it sterilizes future reserves, makes them uneconomic, because what used to average, call it 1.5 grams, now averages 0.75 grams. That's what's left over. That's no longer economic. So that's a real issue. And I saw a report recently by Minex, where over the past few quarters, the average grade mined has gone from, I think it was 1.1 to 1.46 grams a ton. And that just goes to show that they are, in fact, high grading their deposits. And that, in effect, sterilizes a lot of what's out there. Or it means it needs a higher gold price to make those economic again.
All right. So what does the near future hold for mining then?
You probably want a happy ending to this whole story, don't you?
I'll take whatever you got, man.
I think it's really great. I think the opportunities out there are really looking good out 1, 2, 3 years, in that these mining companies are going to have to find, acquire, and develop new economic deposits. And those few that are out there that are real are going to become more and more valuable. So the positive is, I think, by being very selective over this coming year, 3 or 4 years out, we're going to make a lot of money.
Brent, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and wrapping up our celebration week. Cheers.
Thank you. It's great. And congratulations to Kitco as well.
Thank you, Brent. And thank you for following us for these last 5 years, through our formative years. We appreciate all the comments, all the views, and all the ideas you've put forward. So here's to 5 years more, maybe 10, 15, who knows. All the best. Have a nice weekend.
Look, I just don't believe it. I think you're lying. I mean, you don't look 5 at all. You look 18 at least. I just can't believe this.
Congratulations and great luck for the future coming time for Kitco and their team and each and everyone, those who follow the Kitco.